Could I be talking about the summoning monster, the 31.1 changes to Mari, and to Demonologist? I could. I could be talking about this. Maybe one could argue that I should be talking about this. Maybe one could argue that I could do a second video, if I wanted to talk about something else, that I could still talk about that, but I won't. It's because I'd rather talk about this. This is a meme that I made based on Dr. Aegon is one of the moderators, one of the voices of the developer team, right? And like, this is the most corporate way of saying skill issue. So whenever anybody wants to like just put down somebody, like, oh my God, how could I have lost this? And somebody will just write skill issue. And it's just one of those like dismissive kinds of things that people say. And this is the corporate version of that. And it like, I immediately had like this visceral reaction to like just reading this. And then over the, like, I don't know, last 20 minutes, if you haven't understood already, this is going to be a rant video. In the last like 20 minutes, I've like formulated an idea of a video. And so then I was just like, you know what, I'm just going to do a video. I feel like I need to be an equal opportunist, hater. Like most of the time I shit on people, and sometimes I have to shit on developers, and their insane ways of thinking. This is insane. So the person said playing PvP nowadays is simply surrendering to Genie and Twilight Ranger. So much fun, right? For everybody who doesn't understand sarcasm, because apparently a lot of people don't understand. There are, my girlfriend has told me that there are certain parts of the world that don't understand sarcasm. When he says so much fun, he doesn't actually mean that it's very fun. That is a sarcastic comment. It's a sarcastic end of a sentence. Like, I got a stomach ache. So much fun. You know, it's one of those. It's like, it's like, that's how I wanted to spend my birthday, throwing up in the bathroom. You know, like, it's something that we as Americans do, apparently, that other parts of the world do not get, and that's why they're not subscribed to my channel, because that's all I do all day, every day. So, yeah, playing PvP nowadays is simply surrendering to Genie and Twilight Ranger. So much fun. And to that, yes, it is. Every deck is Twilight Ranger. And when the modifier dropped, so that not only is Genie the Pantheon, so it's getting a plus 20%, it's also Star of the Week, so it's getting another plus 20%, I believe. And then you also have the modifier that is Genie Scrapper specific. And so that deck is just going absolutely nuts. And then Twilight Ranger is Twilight Ranger, and people have Reincarnation 3 Twilight Ranger with Zeus, and that deck is still nuts, right? And so at a certain crit level, at a certain point of the game, you just start to see that every single time, and you know, like, you just surrender to it because you know that you're not going to deal that amount of damage. To which Dr. Aegon, again, modifier of the moderator of the Rush Royale Discord, said, "These are strong units. Period. Just like any Pantheon unit, really. Just like any Pantheon unit, really. Let's break that down." Genie is being modified this week, so not only was it one of the best next to Twilight Ranger, but now it's even better than the best, and then Twilight Ranger is the best. To say that it has the same equivalency of Riding Hood. Riding Hood's a Pantheon unit, just like any Pantheon unit, really, just like Riding Hood. It's just as good as Riding Hood. That's their entire concept of Pantheon. It's that these are the best units, and they're all supposed to be the same, but they're definitely not all the same. There will always be something better than everything else in anything. That's just how things work. There will always be something that is the best. Like you can say that like they're all kind of the same, but they will never be the same. There will still be something that if you had all of them that you would choose to play because it's the best. It's not like you're not changing it because of play style. Now, I'm going to equate this to Monopoly. So I'll equate this to Monopoly. All being the same is like the pieces of a Monopoly board, right? There's the car, and then there's the iron, and then there's the dog, right? They're all the same. They're all equivalent, right? And that's how they look at it. But from like maybe your perspective, if you have an affinity to dogs, then the dog to you will always be the best, right? Technically, they are all the same. And if this was a perfect world, they would all be the same. But even in that perfect world where it doesn't matter what you choose as a player, you can choose the iron, that you could choose the car, you can choose the dog, right? It doesn't affect your play style. It doesn't affect anything, the outcome of anything, right? But to you, even though they are still the same, you would still say, no, that's the best. Now, what if each of those things had a different attribute? That they were all quote unquote equal. Now, one like the dog, every time you pass go, instead of collecting $200, you collect $1,000, right? Let's say the iron, every time you have to go directly to jail, you don't go directly to jail, and then you're just visiting, right? Now, if each of those had a different attribute, then you could look at all of those attributes and say, no, that's the best. You could say, this never happens, that one is the best. Even if a developer team were like, no, we've like collated all of this data and, these are all equivalent things. What if there was one that said, whenever somebody lands on your property, they have to pay you double? What if they said another one that said, whenever you land on somebody else's property, you don't have to pay them anything? It's, that one is the best. You never have to give away money. Okay, that one is the best. That's what I mean. There will always be a best. And Twilight Ranger is the best because it's the best. And Genie is the best because that is the modifier of this week. And it's benefiting so much from this modifier. But this is the sentence that really got to me. But you can still outplay them with good strategy, so why give up? That's the sentence that really bothered me. All the previous sentences bothered me. This is the one sentence that really bothered me. You can still outplay them with good strategy. Now, I said that I was going to equate this to Monopoly, and that's what I'm going to do. Monopoly is a strategy-based game. Technically, like whenever you land on something, if you can afford it, you should probably buy it. But if you didn't want to employ that strategy and you wanted to save money for Broadway and Park Place to buy the most expensive pieces on the board, right? You could theoretically you could set aside money. I guess that would be the strategy for that. You could set aside money and then buy everything else. But generally speaking, you are trying to buy everything on the board so that your opponent, so that you knock out your opponent because you have so many things on the board that they have to keep paying you. And then all of a sudden, every time you get money from your opponent, you can then buy more pieces on the board. It's about creating a monopoly. It's about owning the entire board. So the strategy is to just buy everything. If you wanted to, you could attempt to save money and not buy anything. Be like, I don't want this cheap property. I don't want this cheap property. And then land on a cool space and then be like, I have the money to do this. I want to put a hotel on it. I have the thing. And you can try to build up like one section of the board. You could like just super hotel and super house, three spaces, right? So that when your opponent lands on those spaces, they have to pay you a giant quantity, right? And then build out the rest of the board, because ultimately you are trying to still build out the rest of the board, but you can just do it differently. You can just buy in, you can, like, every time you get to a specific spot on the board, maybe the left side, the right side, the top side, the bottom side, you're like, I want to buy everything on that block first. That's a different strategy. You could do that. In a strategy, I'm totally going to have to stitch this together, because I guess my phone just shut off, like the screen shut off, which has basically never happened to me. Anyway, so you could do that in a strategy-based game. If you are playing a Monopoly-type game where you have the ability to affect your opponent's way of playing, you could do that. Rush Royale is not that. Not anymore, it isn't. It used to be that. There used to be ways that you could affect your opponent's board, and that was toxic. You could do that. You could implement a different strategy in order to do something that would disrupt your opponent. And that is not what Rush Royale is anymore, because they've nerfed toxic to the ground for their own reasons. They just want the game to be this. This exact statement that this person made, that it, like, surrendering to Genie and surrendering to Twilight Ranger is the only thing. They can't outright say that this is what they wanted, but this is what they wanted. They wanted to be able to control what is good, what is important, what you need to buy. Because if you don't need to buy any of this, if all you needed to do was just get a shaman and get a Harley Quinn and get a mime and just shaman your opponent's board no matter what their board is, and it's just, you know, you could free to play all of these units. If they wanted you to be able to do that, they wouldn't have nerfed any of it. They wouldn't have nerfed Witch. They wouldn't have nerfed Shaman. Shaman used to auto-target an actual unit on the board, and now it targets a space on the board. That simple changed the way that Shaman, like how effective Shaman is. Like Witch, it used to heal, the unit used to heal for a higher percentage, and they lowered that percentage, so you could potentially Witch somebody's entire board, and all of a sudden, like, it doesn't even matter. And with the advent of each unit having, each good unit having a cleanse, with the advent of having triple counterspell in this game, there's no, with having Mermaid in this game, the entire idea of toxic doesn't even really exist anymore. Even with Demonologist, and I wasn't necessarily going to talk about Demonologist, but even with Demonologist, the stun ability off of the Archmage, they took that out as well. Necromancer doesn't do well because of Phantom Mode. It's just, there's just so many things that they took away from Toxic. Like if you look at Sea Dog when it was first introduced and what it is today, completely different. That was the only quote unquote strategy that you could use to affect your opponent's board. That was the only outplaying them that you could do. Because in the game, in its current state, the game is currently, I'm going to do as much damage as I can do, you're going to do as much damage you can do, and we'll see who's left. Now, they're saying that you can outplay them in the way of Monopoly. In the way of like, oh, well, maybe if I do the bottom half of the board this time and the top half of the board, you know, like, let's try that as a strategy. Oh, you know what? Next time I'll do the bottom half and then the left side, and then that'll force my opponent to do the right side and the top side. And, you know, like, maybe that will change the game. Actually, maybe this time I'm going to buy every piece. Like, whenever I land on it, I'm going to try to buy everything and see what my opponent does. And see if that works as a different strategy, because the opponent is playing the same game as me, and is being affected by the board in the same way. That's strategy. What this game is the first, like at the beginning of a Monopoly match, both of you have to hold your breath, and whoever passes out first loses, and you just play Monopoly. And then having a developer, when you go to them saying like, you know what, this isn't fair because I always play against my brother who's an Olympic swimmer, and he has the ability to hold his breath for 20 minutes. And I can only hold my breath for a minute. And they're like, oh, well, you got to just employ a different strategy. And you're like, what strategy? How am I supposed to do that? How? And do I punch him? And it's like, no player interference. You just have to do what you do, and you just have to let them do whatever they do. And you're like, but he can hold his breath for 20 minutes. I can only hold my breath for 1 minute. And you're like, I guess I could pay for lessons. I could buy profitably some swimming lessons and hold my breath for a longer period of time. And they're like, now you're getting it. Just employ that different strategy of eventually gaining the ability to hold your breath for longer. And you're like, that's kind of strategy, but that has nothing to do with this game. I guess that does change things, but that has nothing to do with Monopoly. Now we're just playing a different game. We're playing a money-based game. It's like, yes, that's the strategy. Just raise your crit and buy profitably. And that's what this game is. That is the only strategy that you can employ. Because what it's not is gameplay. You could run a Zealot deck against a Twilight Ranger deck, but I don't care how you try to outplay them, you're not gonna win. You're just simply not. You're like, I don't know if outplay you mean just play the game and hope that they go into a tunnel because they're playing on, like while driving, and then they drive into a tunnel where their Wi-Fi, their mobile data, they lose internet connection, and then you win, and you can outplay them like that. Or they're in a train, they're playing on a train, and it goes into a tunnel, and then they lose internet connection, or their Wi-Fi cuts out because of an electrical storm. I don't know if that's what they mean by outplay, but I don't think that outplay means what they think it means, because this isn't a game of quote unquote strategy. If you are an equivalent player to your opponent, and you'll never be matched with the same crit, that's just an impossibility in this game, and you'll never have the same cards, but if you did, there would still be a very clear winner. And it's somebody who has a Zeus, somebody who has a Fortuna, somebody who has spent the money to buy legendary heroes, because legendary heroes are obviously better than epic heroes, in the same way legendary units are better than epic units. You can't discount the idea that a legendary hero is just going to beat you because it's just going to beat you. And that's the only strategy that you can employ. If you know that if you played a perfect game, the most you've ever dealt, which might seem like a crazy number, is 200 billion damage, and you know that your opponent's Twilight Ranger deck can go for 1 trillion damage, I don't care how well you play, you cannot outplay 1 trillion damage. You just can't do that. And if you look into legendary replays, yeah, there are people doing 1 trillion damage. We're not back at quadrillion damage yet because there's no percentage damage, but like there are like Reincarnation 3 Zeus decks doing 1 trillion damage. And if you just simply can't do that because of your crit level and your unit choice and your non-legendary hero, then you just simply can't do that. You can't outplay 1 trillion damage. You can't outplay I can hold my breath for 20 minutes. You can't, like, if you can't affect them, if you can't affect their board, then there's nothing you can do. Rush Royale is not a game of 2 players. It's a game where you are trying to just do the best that you can do and hope that that is more damage than what your opponent can do. Because if your opponent can simply do more damage, then they win. That's how this game works. If they can hold their breath for longer, they just win. If they can hold their breath for 4 hours and you can't, there's nothing you can do. Like, that's it. And that's why I don't understand people that, you know, like that even play games that they know they're going to lose. Yeah, is there a chance that the person that can hold their breath for 4 hours, they could, you know, like have a stroke? I guess so. Is there a chance that a building might fall on them? Yeah, sure. There is that chance. Is there a chance that they might get a call and they might have to leave? They might have to leave the challenge very urgently because something has come up. Yeah, I guess that's a thing. And in that way, you can outplay them. But barring that, you know who's gonna win. And there is no outplaying in this game.